The following program is a production of Pioneer Public Television. Hello, and welcome to Compass. I'm Jim Thoreen. This week we launched the season with an overview of local media in this day and age of fake news and other items. We in rural America continue to access and welcome news focused on our community. For decades, the local newspaper and local radio station inform us of issues relevant to our town. Joining me to discuss the realities of local media are two experts who daily meet the challenges in our communities. We welcome the publisher and editor of the Benson Monitor News and the Grant County Herald, Reed Anfinson. He's a longtime local newspaper advocate who takes his mission to the national level as well as local. Reed currently is president of the National Newspaper Foundation and past president of the Minnesota Newspaper Association. Steve Linder is president of Lakeland Broadcasting, based in Willmar, and oversees the operation of 5 radio stations. Fellow broadcasters recognized his long-term commitment to local radio in 2015 when he was inducted into the Minnesota Broadcasting Hall of Fame. Interesting side note, also inducted that year were Paul Douglas and Ron Schara. Pretty good company. Gentlemen, let's start to discuss today our perspectives, and your perspectives particularly about the state of local media, newsprint and radio. And we start kind of with this discussion about, and if we can define it, fake news. You people at the local level are not fake news, but at the national level, we have quite a discussion about that. So how do you look at your presentations in your medium and make sure it is not fake, it is real, and it is accurate? Reed?
Well, fake news as far as small town community newspapers go is real and not real. As far as my coverage of the city council and the school board and the feature stories that we write in our community, there's no fake news there. Everybody knows the people we're writing about. They can confirm that this is true, this is coming from us. They know the source of the information. But as far as the issues that we cover on a broader scope within our communities, like gun control or immigration, that comes into play because we'll be writing stories or columns about those issues, and we have a readership today that is more polarized than it used to be, less willing to listen to both sides of a story.
Well, so you in the content of the news items themselves, as a good journalist, walk the line of facts to the extent that you interpret them or hear them.
Absolutely.
And then on the editorial page, now you take another slant, and we'll get to that as well. Mm-hmm. Now, Steve, in radio, any different? You still have the local audience. You still have a reporter who's bringing the news onto the airwaves. And how do you do that now in the 21st century?
I would say pretty much along the lines of how Reed is approaching it. I don't think the term fake news is even relevant in the local marketplace. I don't think you could do that even if you wanted to. I mean, at the local level, I think it's just a lot more honest. And we're dealing with real issues, whether we're covering the school board or the city council, that a lot of people are aware of and working together on. And these aren't necessarily divisive issues. These are matters that we have to deal with. Mm-hmm. And so I think at the local level, again, I think we are trying to just inform people about these matters so that our elected officials can make good decisions and people can be informed about those decisions.
So for both of you, how do you receive your criticism? If you're writing news stories, whether it's aired or printed, somebody's going to disagree. Some are, somehow. So how do you handle that?
The primary way we get feedback is from our readers. And because we're local, because we're small town, we walk around the corner in the grocery store and there's a person who's not happy with what we wrote and they'll tell us. They'll call us on the phone or they'll stop by the office. So we get direct feedback from people when they're not happy with our reporting.
Well, in a sense, that's an advantage, although I'm sure you don't like to hear a lot of criticism, but you know the game. How about radio? Somebody calls you, as they did this morning.
I did receive a call just before we went on the air about a comment that was made that somebody didn't like, but we talked about it. I think that's okay. But again, I don't think it fell into the category of fake news. It was just, again, like Reed had said, we're so polarized today, and that probably does even filter down, into the local marketplace. It seems like we're divided 50-50 on just about everything.
Right.
But again, I think there is respect. We're living in the same community. We're working with these people, going to sporting events and seeing them when we're out and about in the community. So we do get direct feedback. And I think another medium that is becoming, what I say, more important are the social media networks in terms of how we communicate. So we are getting feedback and able to communicate with people that way. In our business, we consider our core purpose connecting people in the local community. And that really hasn't changed, honestly, from the beginnings of our radio station. We are still committed to that.
But given the multitude of media choices today, how do you retain and attract readers and or listeners? That's a challenge in any community.
Well, I think what we do to keep our readers and listeners is we just provide local community news. Nobody else does that. Everybody else is looking at state and national news. But we provide something that nobody else does. And that's the story about what's happening at our city council or our school board or hospital board. It's what's happening with our schools, our sports. It's happening in the community as far as feature stories go. There's nobody else that writes that story about the kid who had a transplant and the family needs help. There's nobody else that writes that story about the man who's drilling a well north of Benson and hits wood at 200 feet. And what's that wood doing down there? And it makes a fascinating story.
The Lost Ark.
Right, yes.
Well, the same of radio. You're local, you're immediate, people can reach you as they did today, right?
Right, and I think local's the key. I think that it always has been, and I think it still matters. And I think it's probably more important than ever. And even among younger people, I think there's plenty of research to show that local is important to millennials. And that's something we can offer when you talk about, the large media companies. They just simply don't live in our communities. They don't have the same connections that we have. And I think that's what gives us the advantage.
So people today, and particularly perhaps the millennials, the younger people, looking at a device in their hand day in and day out from goodness knows how many sources, are they, as the millennials, the youngsters in our community, are they picking up the newspaper? Do they tune into the radio local to hear what's going on here? Any way to measure that?
Well, we know that from our standpoint in the print media, that there is no revenue in digital. There are 120 newspapers roughly in the 7th Congressional District. In a digital-only world, nearly every single one disappears. And every single community in the 7th Congressional District no longer has anybody covering the city council or the school board. There's no watchdog that's keeping the local officials honest. They spend millions and millions of taxpayer dollars. Somebody has to be watching. And in a digital-only world, that doesn't happen. And so we have to find a place where the people have to pay for the information that keeps them as informed citizens. Originally, when the country was founded, newspapers had both basically free postal and government advertising. The 1880s and 90s come along and advertising takes off. And that supports news media in general until the late 1990s and 2000s, then digital comes. Mm-hmm. And Google and Facebook are destroying journalism in America. They are taking 95% of all new income, and they do no journalism.
All right, so then the question for both of you is, you're going to remain local, you're going to remain live in the case of a radio, print as soon as you can in the weekly newspaper. So how do you do that, remain competitive, and by the end of the day, I think you want to show a profit, don't you?
Yes, I'll make a little bit of a distinction here with radio. I think it's that revenue stream you're talking about has probably impacted print more than it has radio. And the local radio stream has remained strong. So actually we've been able to continue to grow our revenue because advertisers, including the large ones, they want to connect in these local markets. That's so advertisers that are doing business in our communities want to make that local connection. And I think we're still a viable medium to do that. They're willing to pay for that. So fortunately, we still do have that revenue stream to support the local news operations. And the local news operations are key to that because like if you talk with radio, a lot of people think it's just about music. Well, I'm not sure we need radio for music anymore. Look at all the sources we have. So I think music's still an important part of what we do. But what's more important is what we do between the records and the songs.
Right. There's one more point I'd like to make about the challenge that both of us face that has nothing to do with digital. And that is the loss of population in rural Minnesota. Mm-hmm. We've seen a significant reduction of the number of people who are out there as readers and listeners. And Minnesota has to begin to develop some kind of policy that helps resettle rural Minnesota.
Well, that's an issue.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
that's something I think we all need to work together on. And we have to understand the landscape is changing. So I think somehow I think we have to look at the regions too and not fight among ourselves as much as we do, but kind of band together. And how can we make southwestern Minnesota strong and attract more people out here? Because even driving through the countryside this morning, it's a beautiful place.
Yes, it is.
And how do we create the opportunities to allow young people to come out here and live?
So the topic that you bring into this conversation, we're talking media, but now we're also talking about housing, we're talking about jobs, retaining employees, attracting employees, because that's going to be the heartbeat of your audiences.
The key is economic development, no question about it. To create what you're talking about, I think, Reed, too, and supporting that. In fact, in Willmar, we just went through Vision 2040, looking ahead with some strategic planning. And at the end of the day, I think everybody agreed the economic development piece was probably the most important because that really provided the fuel for everything else, that including housing and other opportunities.
Sure. The one significant thing that has changed in economic development, it used to be about creating jobs, now it's about creating people. People creation is what we need. We've got the jobs, we can't find the people.
Mm-hmm. Well, in Benson, you have some very successful industries that for which people drive an hour, half an hour, or more to get to work every day and are in a relatively decent living. Mm-hmm. But let's take to some of the other communities in the area that don't have a major employer, that are looking at their dwindling retail downtown, and how do we stem that and how do we change that through media? What's your role to help bring that about?
Well, I think we do have a role in terms of a vibrant community, and I think we both are trying to communicate and bring people together. In fact, again, getting back to our core purpose is connecting people, and I think if we do that, and like through the effort that we're undergoing in the Willmar community now with Vision 2040. I think that's a way where we can address some of these issues, come up with some solutions and ideas.
Yeah. Very topic will be.
But communication is a very important part of bringing all of this together, and I think both of us are playing an important role in our community. So getting back to local communications, I still think is extremely important in what we're trying to accomplish here.
Stay tuned to Compass. In coming weeks, we'll have people from 2040 joining us to talk about what's happening in Willmar.
Steve makes a good point as far as what he's showing an involvement in his community beyond being a radio owner. And you have to do that in your rural communities. I volunteered to serve on and was appointed by the governor to the Center for Rural Policy and Development Board. I sought that position for one reason. I saw I had to do more for my community than just print stories about the challenges that faced us. I needed to work for the betterment of rural Minnesota. And that's why I sought that position, and Steve's doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think media is an important part of a strong community.
We'll get to, we're going to get to this
And
point.
so I do think, again, we're part of, what allows a community to grow.
Let's get to that point.
Well, we're going to be talking about this. The consolidation of
Right.
media hurt our communities. And I can give an example of that. Montevideo, Redwood, and Granite Falls used to have a publisher in each community who was an integral part of that community, like I am the publisher in Benson. Now those positions are consolidated into one. And when you take the publisher of a newspaper out of a community, you take a key person in the community's heartbeat away from that community. I play many different roles in my community other than a newspaper publisher. Many newspaper publishers, and this is a conflict of interest for them, have gone on to be the mayors of their communities because they're so involved in their communities.
Right. And you, of course, have your Benson operation. You also have Grant County.
The Grant County Herald,
So
yes.
you're spreading yourself thinner and trying to stay active in your communities. And Steve, you're active in Wilmer area activities.
Well, absolutely. That's one of our core values is basically community.
So how do you balance that in your personal lives? You've got a job to do, you want to earn a decent living, and yet you're committed to your community.
I think it's a lifestyle we love, right?
Yes, we're captured by
It's
it.
a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. Right? I mean, and I think there are a lot of rewards, to that, that lifestyle. So yeah, if you're looking for other things, that may bring you or take you somewhere else. But I think getting involved, I mean, it's fun, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's fun.
Now, and great, we're all of a certain age, gentlemen. Now let's take the millennial. Let's take the 32-year-old fellow who has a decent job. His wife is about the same age, and they have 3 children. They're both working to make sure they've got an income to support their style of living. The children are going through various stages from grade school to high school, and they're in sports, and they're in, you name it. This couple of that age bracket is going 24/7. So how do we engage those people to learn more through the local media in order to become active in their communities? A huge challenge in rural America.
That is a huge challenge. And getting young people, I think, through all generations has always been difficult. To get young people who have families who are extraordinarily busy, to get them involved in serving in volunteer positions within the community, running for public office, that has always been a challenge. But I think young people are seeing today that they're needed. There's not that older generation there that's going to do this forever. People are dropping out. Boards and commissions in cities across rural America are struggling to find volunteers to serve. And by serving, they can have a meaningful impact on the direction their community is going and what their children have available to do.
And I think this whole about being too busy. We're all too busy, right? And I think busy doing what? I think we need to reprioritize. That's probably at both levels, home and work. But I also think in terms of what we do in the communities, we try and inform people. We try let them know about the various opportunities that are out there and get them excited about it. Mm-hmm. And the value, because whether we're building a playground or we're doing other things in terms of adding amenities to the community, that's one of the things we've identified. People want more things to do. We can be part of how we bring people together, and I think young people are interested in doing things if they see the value in it. They're not interested in necessarily going to a service club meeting every Wednesday just for the sake of going to a meeting every Wednesday. But if they see something being done that they believe is important and will be something important to their family, I think they're willing to participate.
So in your respective medium, you address that in what means? I read your editorials. In addition to the content.
You do it through columns and editorials that you write. You do it in the stories you write. If one of our organizations is struggling for volunteers, we'll do a story on that. And then we'll show why getting involved with this organization will have an impact on the community, your life, and your children's life.
And we do it, obviously, with getting people on the radio and our radio shows and what our radio personalities are talking about. And maybe they're involved in some of these themselves. So we like to get people, and on our news talk, KWLM, we've got a program called Open Mic, where, like if some of these projects are going on, people come in, they talk about them, and attract people's interest.
It's been amazing over the years as I've observed through the medium or in personal experience. Somebody catches on, said, we need, for example, a splash pad, something so I mean, it's a tough, tough challenge, but they grab onto it and they go. And when it's in their heart, then they'll follow the medium that is correct. I mean, you do hear that and you see it, those who catch fire, if you will. They're the community builders.
We need leaders in our community, to take on those projects. And we've had that. I've seen the various ones that have been successful in part because there's somebody that just has a passion for that and they want to. But then we also help them a lot in terms of what should I say, giving them a bigger voice to reach more people.
How do you measure the impact of your respective medium in your community? Is there polling? Is there anecdotal on-the-street discussion over a cup of coffee? How do you measure your impact?
It's in the radio, but it's very difficult. We are not a rated market. The larger markets actually have a rating system for audience, which it's debatable how accurate even that is, because most of them just don't have enough respondents, and audience is kind of a dynamic thing. It's hard to measure. So there's a limited amount of that. I think for us, we have. I think you get a sense of it in the community, and we encourage all of our employees to be involved in the community. The other thing is with social media, I think it has some downsides, but it also has some advantages. It's a way we're connecting with people more and more, and also getting more feedback from people. So it goes both ways, so I think that is somewhat of a measurement. And response to things that we do. We do radio contests and things like that. And so we kind of monitor the response to those kind of things, and that's how we get a sense of audience. And obviously on the economic side, it's advertising. And rather than ratings, we're selling results. So if the advertisers are seeing results, that's really our objective on that side of the business.
On the print side?
One of the ways we see that in our community is we recently had a meeting talking about the sports going on in Benson and their records. Well, they wanted the newspaper there to cover the issue. They wanted us to report. And why do they want us there to report? Because they feel the community needs to be formed of this issue. Mm-hmm. It was also interesting at that meeting, a young man stood up and said, if I want to see change in this community, I've realized I have to stand up. And if that means running for public office, I will. And this was a young person saying it. So you had a meeting with a bunch of people coming together, looking for purpose in their community. And a lot of that issue is reported in the newspaper. And there's a buy-in from the community that if we don't have our newspaper in our community reporting this, we're not going to be reading about it. It'll be limited to our social media sites. And those are circles of friends and silos.
And maybe not accurate.
And they're passionately not accurate. We also, we get the feedback from phone calls and discussions we have with people. We sit down at coffee.
Yes. People
talk to us. As far as our reach in the community, it's hard to, always measure that. We know it because the newspaper sits in the coffee shop, sits at the gas station, it sits at the library. People can read it just about anywhere. They don't have to subscribe.
And they know who you are.
And they know who I am, and they know I'm accessible.
That's important. Yeah. And you get the phone calls.
Absolutely.
You get a note now and then about, hey, what were you guys thinking when that was aired?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned before we went on air, a call from a listener that had a question about something that was said on the radio, or how we cover something, which is changing too. Right. And in fact, it had to do with some state tournament coverage. So we're doing some streaming. We still do. We make a big commitment on air, but you can't put everything. We only have so much time. You can't do two things at once. And so we are kind of doing some streaming, which a lot of people appreciate, but some people may not because they'd rather hear it over the air. It's easier, and maybe they don't have access to the internet.
So, gentlemen, as this half hour has moved along very swiftly, how do we wrap things up? What do you see as the future for local hometown news? So, Reed?
Well, that's a challenge. How do I sell my newspaper or newspapers when it comes time to sell them? To a local person? And I am really driven to sell to somebody who will make Benson and the Grant County Herald in Elbow Lake, make those two communities their homes. Mm-hmm. I think that's essential. You can't have a corporation out of New York, like Gatehouse, buy up a bunch of newspapers, strip the staff down to nothing, mm-hmm. ship out all the work to central locations. You have to have a local journalist. So it may mean that I end up taking somewhat of a hit on what I sell for.
Gatehouse sounds like a bad novel. Just suggesting. On the radio side, how do you keep it within the community and keep it for the future?
if you're talking about the business, I'm kind of with Reed, in terms of, I think it's finding somebody that wants to come in and live this kind of lifestyle, and I would approach it the same way. But I'm still very excited about the opportunities for local journalism. It's so important. It is vital to our communities, and I think that our communities recognize that. And so we need to keep working hard on this and finding ways to make it sustainable.
Well, Steve, Reed, thank you much. You ended on a great word, vital. So we thank you.
Sustainable.
And sustainable. Thank you, gentlemen, for your insights and your perspectives on the state of rural media. So that's Compass for this week. Join us each Thursday evening to examine issues which affect you and your community. Thank you for watching Pioneer Public TV. Do you have an idea for Compass? Send your suggestions and comments to yourtv@pioneer.org. If you missed an episode of Compass, every episode is available to watch free online at video.pioneer.org or on the PBS Video app. And keep up to date with the latest Compass happenings on our Facebook page. Search Compass on Pioneer on Facebook and hit the like button.